I have given a name to my pain. The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham. You don't really think you'll win, do you? I'm Batman.
Hey now, welcome to episode number 168 of the Batman on Film podcast. I almost said vlog. It's been a minute or two since I actually hosted a Batman on Film podcast, but here I am back. And joining me is, I'm Bill Jett Ramey from Batman on Film. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of the website. And with me is BOF's Eric Holzman. Eric, how are you, sir?
Good, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing okay. Hanging in there, trying to get past all this COVID-19 lockdown stuff and start. It's been a little chore to move 4 hours away. Well, under these conditions, let me tell you that. Also joining me is Batman on Film's Garret Grev. Who's usually with me on the vlog. Garret, how are you?
I'm great, Bill. It's good to talk with you on the podcast. I was just thinking, been on the podcast for the site for quite a while now. Year and a half, couple years, and you and I have been doing the vlogs for a while, but I don't think we've actually ever been on a podcast together before. Some of the audio we did from the vlog you released as a podcast. But This is the first time I think we're recording with the intention of it being a podcast episode.
Well, there you go.
Very exciting.
It's the first time for everything. And let me bring in our very special guest. That would be Mario Francisco Robles from Revenge of the Fans, El Fanboy, and the senior DJ of New York City, sir.
Yeah, Bill.
Congratulations and all that. I checked you out live several times on Facebook Live and stuff, so that was awesome, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a very interesting couple of months here in New York, trying to improvise and make the most out of what's going on with the quarantine, and kind of using my DJ, abilities to try to bring some cheer to my neighborhood, and I'm glad that that's getting a nice spotlight. But right now, I'm glad to kind of delve back into being a full-on geeky fanboy again and talking some Batman and some Justice League stuff. I haven't been on a BOF thing in a while, so let's do this.
So yeah, let's do this. Let's get right into it. What we're going to do, guys, is, and let me apologize to everyone who sounds like, if you're listening, I do sound like I'm coming literally from the Batcave, but I'm actually in my office. There's just nothing on the walls. I have my desk, my laptop, and a microphone. So it's going to have to make do. I'm moving, so most of my stuff is 4 hours away in my other house, and I'll try to fix it a little bit in post, but it's not. I don't think it's that. I am on my good bike, so I'll apologize if that's annoying to anybody. All right, so what we're going to talk about is last week, Warner Brothers, I should say actually, AT&T and HBO Max announced that they were going to provide director Zack Snyder the money it would take to finish the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and it would debut on HBO Max in 2021. So next year. There was not a specific date, but sometime in 2021. So to start with that, Mario, I'll go with you since you're the guest. Did you think it would ever happen, and what's your take on the whole, just the fact it's released? Are you happy? Are you cared? Are you sad? What is it?
I'm with it, which is funny. Like, my reaction is going to seem a little strange, considering like you liked Man of Steel way more than I did.
Yes.
And in general, I was kind of happy when it seemed like the Snyder era was over. But honestly, these last few years, kind of watching the twists and turns of this whole story, I've kind of come away with a different perspective. I guess maybe because Warner Brothers did so much to sort of revamp and overhaul and change the course, and yet what they replaced it with has been kind of hit or miss, and not exactly this big, huge, golden new horizon of DC films. I'm kind of cool with going, all right, let's see on HBO Max a branching path, an alternate cut. I don't see how it could hurt. I think it could only help. So I'm kind of like, I'm feeling it. I'm into this, believe it or not. I have so much curiosity after all of the conversations, after all of the heated debates, after all of this hype and all of the energy that's gone into this. I'm finally just kind of excited to see, like, well, let's see what all the hype was about. Let's see what they make of this. As a DC fan, I just cannot help but be super curious about how this is going to go. So I'm pretty much on the positive end of this ever since they announced it.
All right, very good. Garret, where do you stand on this? And we talked about it a little bit, you and I, but go ahead. We're on a podcast, so.
Yeah, so color me intrigued. Like, I'm going to watch this thing. I've admitted that right away, and I don't feel bad about admitting that, right? But I wasn't a huge proponent of the Snyder cut, just because, Mario mentioned it. Like, I really didn't dig what we got, and I didn't want to continue on down the path. Now, I won't steal your phrase and say that I borderline loved Man of Steel, but I like Man of Steel a lot. I've got some issues with it. I wanted to see it go in a different direction, to continue on with that character from where we saw Superman end up at the end of that film, and then we sort of went into BVS, and not to get back into BVS, but then at the end of Justice League, I was actually pretty pleased with where at least Superman was. So it'll be interesting to see just how different this approach and this take is. So, I'm going to watch it. I don't even know if I could call myself cautiously optimistic. I'm a little bit concerned about what we'll get, and I hate to be, a Debbie Downer, negative Nancy or whatever else you want to put in there, grumpy Garret. But if it is more dark and more serious and more muted and a little bit more depressing along the lines of BVS, I'm not going to be thrilled. And I do have a little bit of concerns about what it would mean for the future DC movies if all of a sudden audiences, grab onto this. Good for DC, but that wouldn't feel like I was going to get the representation of these characters that I know and love. And obviously Warner Brothers and AT&T aren't making movies for Garret, but that would be a bit of a bummer for me.
Understood. All right, Eric. Your turn, sir.
All right. When I first heard the news, I was kind of shocked. I'm not going to lie. I had gone on record many times saying I didn't think it was going to happen for many of the reasons we've all discussed. The money it would take to do it, how much of it is actually completed. So when it first came out, I was shocked. Now that I've had a little time to think about it, of course I'm intrigued, right? We've been hearing about this cut of this film pretty much for 3 years. So now I'm intrigued, and I want to know what they did with it. What he did with it, what his vision was now, and how he saw these characters ending up in his world. So I'm a little bit more, it's more intrigued than actually wanting it. I'm kind of about the whole thing anyway, but now that it's here, I'm just really intrigued to see what the movie holds.
All right, let me just say again where I stand, because there's a lot of misconception out there, to say the least. I don't care, never have cared, whether they release the Justice League or Zack Snyder's Justice League or not. That's the bottom line. My issue has always been, quite frankly, with the toxic fan behavior behind the desire, the push, the hashtag movement to get it done. I never thought it would happen, but for a variety of reasons. Number one, it goes against the narrative that Warner Brothers put out surrounding the theatrical cut release of Justice League in 2017. And secondly, the money. And that's the big thing. I never thought they would put the money into a film to finish it, the amount of money, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, that it would require to finish it, and that a film that just didn't do that well, that lost money. It's lost up to anywhere from $50 to $100 million already, and I just didn't see them doing that, especially when they made an overt effort to move away from all of the those three films, the BBS or Man of Steel, BBS, and Justice League, and do other things with DC on film. So that's where I'm at. I don't care. Will I watch it? I don't know. I don't have HBO Max. I don't know if I'll get it just to watch it. I know that BOF will cover and review it when it comes out, but I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm extremely surprised that they're going to release it. So, with that said, originally they said Warner Brothers. I keep saying Warner Brothers. I should say accurately. AT&T and HBO Max are going to put $20 to $30 million into it, and now it seems that is going to be even more. So let me read you something from a quote from Bob Greenblatt, who is the Warner Media chairman. And this was on a podcast called Recode Media Podcast, and I'm getting this from a fellow OG of the internet, Garth Franklin of Dark Horizons. I think he and I are the only ones left from like the late 90s who are still doing this thing. But Mr. Greenblatt says, and I'm going to let you all comment, it isn't as easy as going into the vault and there's a Snyder cut sitting there to put out. It does not exist. Zack is actually building it, and it's complex, including new VVX shots. It's a radical rethinking of that movie. It's complicated and wildly expensive. I'll just say I wish it was just $30 million and stop there. It's an enormous undertaking, and it's very complex. All right, fellas, what do you think?
Well, if I can be the first to kind of jump in on this, one thing that I think needs to be stated is that all the money that was thrown at Justice League and all the money that was lost on Justice League, that was under the old ownership. Those are old expenses. That's already done. For AT&T, these are going to be the first dollars they ever actually spend on Justice League. So for them, it looks totally different. For them, it's like, all right, for 30 or 40, even if it's 50 or 60, right? Even if, for let's say $50 million, we're going to get 6 weeks of premium content and exclusive content that we could sell to all the geeks and nerds of the world who are going to really want to see this next year. There's all this social media hype. There have been articles about it. There's a book on the way.
But are they, Mario? Are they?
What do you mean?
Is there that big of a desire? And I'm talking overall, general audience, to see this, to see it. They didn't come out for BVS. They didn't come out for Justice League because of BVS.
Well, but again, remember, it underperformed, but it's not like it flopped. You know, BVS made $873 and then a ton in the home distribution.
And it was also underwhelming at the box office, correct? But it also was hammered critically, and it was turned off the general audience. It didn't resonate with them, that whole thing. And this is, and it's a little bit of data here on it. It's on BVS. It did make it made $126 million in profit. It had a 30% ROI, and it's Metacritic is a 44. It's mixed. It had a 6.9 user. On Metacritic, the users' reviews, it's not a beloved film that did tremendously well.
Oh no, you're preaching to the choir. I know that. I've hammered that movie for years and years.
Yes.
But I think it's still, there's a distinction to be made in that it didn't like bomb and flop. It did actually make some money. And with the proper public relations, with the proper selling and marketing of this, all you have to do is let the consumer know that was a tampered version of the film. Just like they're going to do with Justice League. They're going to say that BVS wasn't really what he wanted to do, and the Justice League you saw wasn't really what he wanted to do. Because we know the truth, right? BVS, the theatrical cut was also tampered with. The tampering had already started there when they chopped off a half hour and he had to re-edit it. So that was a tampered movie. So if you try to sell it like, well, here's the real take, here is the alternate cut of what the director really had in mind, you're going to get lots of curious people, even people who hated that. If they see commercials that go, here's the original version of what this was going to be, some eyebrows are going to go up, some ears are going to be perked to be like, all right, well, you know what? I hated that movie, but if that wasn't really what it was supposed to be, I've already got HBO. Let me see the first episode on Sunday and decide for myself.
Okay.
There's going to be curiosity.
All right, point taken. I also would say that the extended cut of BVS is not markedly better. It's more the same. It just fleshes out some plot points, but it doesn't make the movie any different, because I think the dark, morose, depressing tone of the film is what really turns people off, and it's certainly not it's not like a bag full of laughs and fun with the extended cut. So, Garret, where you at there, sir?
Well, I'll agree with you a bit, Bill. I just to touch on the extended cut of BVS, I like it better because it fills in the plot points. I think it makes the movie work better.
I agree.
It doesn't necessarily make me like the approach to the characters or story that the director is trying to tell anymore.
I agree, and I don't want to interrupt, but don't you notice that doesn't it even feel shorter?
It does. It absolutely does. I said that the first time I watched it. I'm like, it's not as much of a chore to watch, and I don't like even saying that, right? Because that doesn't mean that's fairly faint praise, right?
Yeah, that's very faint praise.
But Mario, what you said, you brought something up, and I think about it. So I went to school and studied econ, and even people that are into econ sometimes forget our basic econ principles, and it's the concept of sunk costs. And you bring up a very good point, that under new ownership and new leadership, the sunk costs that the company, as it existed previously, which is not how it exists anymore, put into that product, really shouldn't, if you're being intelligent about how you spend money, shouldn't necessarily have a huge impact in how you spend future money. So if they can do these things, sort of capitalize on this intrigue and mystery that's been created, and like, oh, I hear the nerds are worked up about something. Let's check out and see what it is, of the movement, quote unquote, and the billboards and what have you. If they can turn that into effective PR and marketing, and I don't think Justice League or really BVS had the best marketing, and can make people interested and turn that into subscription numbers, then $50 million or more is not a huge expense. If you think about this in terms of premium sort of streaming cable format storytelling, I mean that's nothing compared to a season of Game of Thrones, right? So if they can do it the right way, it could be huge. Now, whether or not they're able to, and whether or not the public interest is there, is going to be another question entirely.
Yeah, the biggest thing I took from that quote yesterday was when he said it's not finished. We have been being told for 3 years now that the cut is finished. It just needs to be touched up a little bit, but the cut exists, and it's all put together. And so that was the biggest thing I took from that. So when he said that, and then he went on to say that, yes, it's been 20-30 million is nowhere close to what it's going to cost. I kind of was like, okay, this kind of confirms things I'd been hearing that it really wasn't done. So his clearing that up yesterday, I think is good on a number of reasons. One, now we know it's going to cost more money. Two, you kind of have a better scope of when this is going to come out next year, right? If it was cheaper, it'd be quicker. It's probably going to come out, probably in the summer, I would think, sometime in the summer next year. And then lastly, and this is kind of still open-ended, what does he need to add to it? I know it's been said that obviously the actors aren't coming back. They're not going to do any of that, new scenes that way. But what else is he adding to it to finish the film? So,
yeah, Eric, it's interesting because that was a thing I noticed, and I sent over, when I saw that quote to Bill. I said, take a look at this, because the victory lap's being taken. And I know, Bill, like we talked before we recorded, and we, stay clear of some subjects. This isn't a bashing podcast, and I don't want to do that either. But I think it's important that we stick to the truth and not let revisionist history narratives take hold where they don't need to. Because I don't think it's beneficial. I don't think it's a healthy thing for certain individuals to think that this is this huge victory that they had believed in for 2 years, that there was a finished cut that this evil corporation was just getting in the way of. It didn't exist. It's clear that it didn't exist, and it's cool for them. I'm glad for the people that weren't the poor behaviors in this, that a company is investing this type of resources to give them the thing they wanted. But let's not pretend that thing already existed. Just because you take pictures of film canisters and put them on an Instagram account or a Vero account doesn't prove that this thing was ready to roll. Otherwise, we'd probably get it when the service launched. So, I took two things from that quote. AT&T's willing to pony up some bucks and get into some production to turn this thing out and hopefully make a really good product of it. And two, that should make you happy. But you also have to acknowledge that, this thing wasn't across the finish line like a lot of people had been claiming for a long time, and like we had been taking a lot of heat and a lot of just call it harassment for saying that let's be reasonable. It probably doesn't exist. If it ever does come out, it would take a lot. Our position was we didn't think, you and I and Eric, I know we all agreed that we didn't see it happening. We were wrong. It's happening under different leadership, but it's that take was wrong. It's going to take some money, and hopefully that money and the additional year of work or however long it is means that the product is going to be as good as possible, but it's not there yet. That's very clear.
Yes, I want to just clear up and it's not a bash thing, but it seemed like the goalpost for Justice League kept moving starting in, the middle of 2017 up until now, basically, with what its status was. So can we all, I'm just going to put this out and tell me if you agree or not, and if you want to comment, that's fine. So when Joss Whedon came on board, or was he hired to do reshoots and rewrites that were just standard pickups and so forth? Yes, no, because we know the answer to that.
Oh, come on. Absolutely not. But is anyone in denial?
Well, that's like I said. The story kept changing. The narrative kept changing. The goalposts kept moving for the Zack Snyder supporters of what was truth and not. Mm-hmm. So the story was that he was brought in to quote unquote finish Zack Snyder's vision, and those Snyder fans raged on that. Mario, and you're one because both Latino Review and Batman on Film reported it almost the same time. That was not the case, was it?
No, it was most certainly not.
Yes. So if you want to say anything about that real quick to defend your stance, please do so, sir.
I mean, to me, I don't really need to. I don't really feel the need to defend that stance because to me, like.
You don't need this, exactly. You don't need to defend it.
I don't need to defend it, but also, like, to me, but another thing to factor in, though, is, yes, they floated out this false narrative, and they muddied the waters, and they created all this confusion, right? But to me, on November 17th, the debate ended. To me, as far as I'm concerned, as soon as you see that movie, anyone who sees that knows immediately, oh, okay, this was a heavily tampered with film. This is not really a Zack Snyder film. So it confirmed a lot. So that's why, like, the fact that there was some confusion even after that is like, what? But
the whole thing was that rage against, the media who were telling them, well, just reporting, not telling anybody anything, just saying, look, these aren't standard pickups. Yeah. These aren't standard reshoots. That instantly went away when they saw the film. Yeah. Let's be clear. They went into that film believing that Joss Whedon was finishing Zack's vision, and when they showed up on opening night, they thought that. Mm-hmm. So that contributes to another point I try to make is it didn't do well opening day. Yeah. But all of those people went to see it. Every fan went and saw that film opening day, and including Zack Snyder fans and including the ones who were not. And it was the mainstream who didn't show up because they didn't care much about BVS, but it's a whole, chicken and egg thing there. Yeah. But a couple other misconceptions I just want to bring out. Zack Snyder's cut wasn't finished. Okay? No. So people said, look, I said it, you said it, we've all said it. Yeah, there's a cut of it. It's not finished. If it's not finished, it can't exist. There were a lot of people, guys, that thought when HBO Max went online today that Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League could immediately go on it. All Warner Bros. Had to do several months ago is just give the okay and they could put it on the big screen and it's ready to roll. And that wasn't the case.
No, it's definitely not the case. But honestly, like, if we're going to talk about, like, exploding narratives, I think Warner Brothers did it to themselves. As soon as they released that movie, which was so clearly tampered with, they pretty much wiped the floor with their own alibi. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way they could put that out there with Henry Cavill's blurry face and Ben Affleck's bloated face and how sloppily that whole thing was put together and then expect anyone to think that the THR narrative held any water. So in terms terms of like, is Warner Brothers willing to admit that they were lying the first time around? I mean, I think as soon as that movie came out, the cat was out of the bag, right?
But yes. I don't think they will, right? And it seems like it almost seems like we're past that point. And if they wanted to, they could just pivot away from under old leadership or whatever. Mario, you can't forget the really poor Nordic background of Aquaman in the water, God. Where he's clearly in front of like the world's worst green screen.
Just horrendous.
But it's fun. It's funny because you can poke at all these things. I feel like I'm an island here, but I just rewatched Justice League the other night with all the information and hype. I still find it a perfectly enjoyable movie. I don't, as a Batman fan, I don't like some of what they did with Batman. It's certainly the infamous screen grab of the goofy smiling face and some of the, I don't not like you stuff. But, overall, I thought it was enjoyable. It was one I actually got to watch with my oldest son. And I very much like where Superman ends that film with. So that's where, if we get a higher production quality product out of this HBO Max series, that's cool. But if it ends in a dramatically different position than the theatrical Justice League left us, I don't know that that's a win for the characters or a win for me. Maybe it's a win for the filmmakers, and that trumps all. But I don't know. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I've gone on record saying that the theatrical cut of Justice League is actually a kids movie now. It's not really a movie that was made for obviously what Zack was doing in BVS. So. And I do remember this. I do remember one thing I want to bring out. After we heard about the changes and stuff, it was right around when Wonder Woman came out. And then we did hear again that they were adding more Wonder Woman to Justice League. So I just want to throw that in there because I wonder what they did, what his original cut had to do now as opposed to what we saw. That's what theatrical cut.
Well, to me, the big question continues to be also like which version of Justice League or which version of the script is he going to basically try to quote unquote complete now?
Yeah.
Right? Because there have been all these different iterations. There was the two-parter that he had worked on with Terrio, which got rewritten hastily leading up to principal photography in April of 2017.
Correct.
It turned into one movie. Then there was the second version of the movie that that Jeff Johns had a hand in rewriting, and that we heard about that primarily that's what got filmed towards the latter half of 2017, right? So that's version 2. Then there's version 3, which is the Whedon version. So we know he's not going to try to complete the Whedon version because for all intents and purposes we saw that. But in terms of the first 2 versions, quote unquote, of Justice League that he wanted to tell, one was like a 2-parter that had this whole long drawn out arc that had Superman coming back and being dark at first and all that. Yes. But then there's the version he did that was like the compromise where it ends on the optimistic note. That's why he's the one who shot the shirt rip that's even at the end of the theatrical cut. He filmed that. So Snyder has a version of this movie that ends with the colorful, more optimistic Superman at the end. So I'm just curious, like, so is that, I guess as long as that's the version he's completing and it ends with the Superman that we saw at in those closing moments of the theatrical cut, I think this is going to work out fine.
Yeah,
and
Mario,
pardon the noise. I'm in the garage and the door's opening. Sorry about
No worries.
Pardon the interruption, though, but Mario, I know you're a huge Superman fan, and I'm a big Superman fan, too. And, I think that's a really good point. And it makes me think of another conversation point that I've had with Bill, and I've had with Eric, I've had with Pete, and a number of the other guys, in that if we think about which version of this story, as you brought up, Mario, is Snyder going back to complete, maybe it's option D, right? Maybe it's the version he's been rewriting of this thing for 2 years, because I'm still not bought in that Green Lantern Martian Manhunter was originally part of this thing with Henry Lennox, right? Is that the
You're correct.
I don't know. I don't really buy that. I think there's a lot of revisionist history on Snyder's part too, as he's had a chance to listen to feedback and listen to fans and go back and say, I could have done this, I could have done that, and do some of those rewrites reapproaches make it into this version. And I'm not saying that would make it any better or worse. It could be super cool, but it still just doesn't feel like we're ever going to see what this guy originally intended. And unfortunately, I think there's going to be a big bunch of people that aren't satisfied until they get that. And I hate to go out on a limb again here and be proven wrong, but I think it's safe to say we'll never see what Snyder originally envisioned for these characters in a Justice League setting.
I would have to agree with Mario, or at least with one of his options there, is that you would have to put out a version that has a ending, and not, because we do know that it was originally supposed to be a two-parter. It was going to end, spoiler alert, but I guess really not, with Wonder Woman cutting off the head of Steppenwolf and a boom tube opening up and Darkseid showing up, which would lead into Justice League 2. And I think even at the end of Justice League, Superman was still like bad Darkseid minion Superman. So I would hate for this to not to have a conclusion, because the last thing I want to see is another crappy version of Superman. Even though I love Man of Steel, borderline love Man of Steel, I did not like the way Superman was portrayed in BVS at all. And what do you have, about 35, 36 lines in the whole entire movie? And I just thought it was and then he died, so I just can't see how they're going to end this and do the whole 2-movie arc that was originally planned. Even with the 4.5 hours of footage that he shot a lot of stuff, even after the changes with once Jeff Johns and John Byrne came in after BVS.
Well, that's why I think Garret might have hit the nail on the head, that it's not going to be versions 1, 2, or 3, but option 4, option D, as he said it. I think he's going to look at all the footage he shot, which a lot of it is like a compromise between what he wanted to do and what the studio wanted at the time, which people have to keep in mind, that even the Snyder cut is probably going to include some of Jeff Johns' rewrites, and that's just the way it is, because that's what he had to work with.
Absolutely.
But, I think he's going to look at all that and figure out, how can I reconstitute this into this new format? And some of the verbiage in their initial conversation with THR seemed to imply that, part of the task they were given when they were given permission to explore this for real was to look at everything again and figure out, what can I do to kind of adapt this into a new form. So I think it's going to be a 4th form, and I think he is going to add some stuff. I think there will be a little bit of additional photography, but probably only with actors like Henry Lennox, and he's not going to be able to get Affleck. He's not going to be able to get Gal Gadot or any, but he might be able to write like a B plot that will tie all these things together, add a few cliffhangers, because he dropped this whole hint about Martian Manhunter. What is it like to have an alien infiltrating one of the highest offices in government? So I really think he's going to build a subplot, like some kind of through line that has to do with the Harry Lennox character, and he's going to find other human, smaller, less big name characters that are going to help create a connective tissue. He's going to add a cliffhanger or two to turn it into a 6-week series. So I think we are going to get a 4th version, but that 4th version is going to include some of the compromises he had to make, and that's something that
he did have to compromise, because Warner Brothers Pictures they are not really involved in this. It's not a Warner Brothers Pictures deal. It's AT&T and it's HBO Max, and that's a whole other conversation of what really got this done. Besides the fans online, was it AT&T and needed some for HBO Max? But anyway, but part of it was they don't want anything to interfere with what they've got going on the big screen, whether it be the Batman, of course, which is a completely different version than the one, Ben Affleck's version that you'll see again in this HBO Max Snyder Cut miniseries, I guess, or limited series, whatever we want to call it now. But, they're still going to actively make Aquaman movies with Jason Momoa and Wonder Woman films with Gal Gadot. So I think part of the deal was, okay, well, you can finish this. We'll sign off on it. But there's not going to be any additional reshoots with the cast. And then, frankly, Ben Affleck doesn't want any more part of this whatsoever again, because I don't think his experience was very, very positive, even. And I'm a big Ben Affleck fan and would have loved to see him I wish, looking back in hindsight, excuse me, I wish all this had been a success, and I wish Ben had been able to do the Batman, his version, even though I think it's been, I've said for a long time, it was time for him to move on, and I'm glad they are rebooting with the Batman, but that's still, I don't think this is going to lead to a Ben Affleck miniseries, Batman on HBO Max. I don't think, or any of that.
But let's have fun with that, right? Because we're fans and we're nerds. And let me ask you, Bill, how would you feel?
Okay.
Because HBO has a track record of getting A-list talent that you wouldn't expect to come and do like really high quality, superbly written, directed, high production value series work for their network. They've been doing it, they had pretty much invented that. Before Netflix got so popular doing it, HBO's been doing it for 30 years where they get Steven Spielberg, they get Tom, they go for the top shelf. Even True Detective with Matthew McConaughey and so they're known to not spare any expense and to go right for the top shelf. So let's say somehow with the amount of buzz, let's just have some fun, go down the rabbit hole. Bill, how do you feel if they announce that Ben Affleck is going to do like a 4 to 6 part miniseries of the Batman, of the story maybe he would have wanted to tell, that lives exclusively on HBO Max? Are you excited, or are you like, oh God, let's just stop relitigating that?
More of the latter, although I would watch it as a fan of Ben Affleck and as someone who was a huge fan of him possibly directing a Batman film when he was first cast as Batman back in 2013. But with that said, I'd rather see Batman on the big screen. I think after Matt Reeves' run is done, in a decade, I think maybe the next incarnation of live-action Batman can be a streaming type series on HBO Max or HBO, probably something akin to Watchmen. In fact, I'll bring this up to you guys. I said yesterday on the Facebook fan group, that I would love to see them do like a limited series Western with Jonah Hex, or do Justice League Kingdom Come like that, or New Frontier, or Sandman Theater. I think there's a lot of DC properties they can do, like they did with the Watchmen series, that and instead of going back to a well that was kind of dry and not very good water, and continue on with stuff that has to be tied into the quote-unquote Snyderverse. But that's my opinion. But I think there's a lot of DC stuff you can do. Deadman, The Spectre, Justice League Dark, The Question, Booster Gold. There's just lots of that I think is more suited for that type of medium than maybe the big screen. And while we haven't seen a lot of big screen movies with those guys.
I'm with you. How about you guys? How about you, Eric? You hear there's a Ben Affleck HBO Max miniseries coming out. What is your first gut reaction?
My first gut reaction would probably be why.
Hater.
Because, but no, I mean, as a Batman fan, obviously I'd be intrigued again. And of course, I'd be interested to seeing where they're going to go with this. Now, is it going to be, would it be a Zack Snyder helm thing? Where he's doing
No,
it?
I assume it would be. Let's assume it's like Affleck. You're a filmmaker. You're a writer, director. You already had a script you worked on. We're going to give you the budget to make this. So Ben Affleck gets to do it.
But it's this Batman.
Yes, it's this Batman.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I kind of would like to see, now that we have a jump off point. He's an older Batman. Where are they going to go with it? Does it devolve into like a Batman Beyond type thing where he, has someone else come in and teach him the ropes, to evolve in something like that? I think that could be a cool story to tell. And
and not to go too further down this rabbit hole, because I know this isn't even my podcast, and I just hijacked it with this hypothetical. But
go hypothetical away.
Yeah, well, just not to go too much further, down the rabbit hole.
Yes,
but. The Batman film that he wanted to make wouldn't cost a lot to do. Because remember, he wasn't going for some big CG villain. This wasn't going to be some big, ridiculously overblown film. It was going to be him and Deathstroke. So you could probably do a Batman Deathstroke on the cheap. to get this done. So that's just another thing I think works in its favor. Listen, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Ben Affleck's ever squeezing his ass into a Batman suit again.
No.
But honestly, this announcement from HBO Max, who really saw this coming? So now that this has happened, and now that it seems like, wow, these people have money to spend, and they seem to be interested in looking down that avenue of stories. And they seem to have looked at all this social media activity as some sort of sign that there is a decent enough, there's a decent sized fan base that wants to see this branching path explored. So if they continue to look at it that way, and the membership numbers are going the right way, I kind of think we should look at this like all options are on the table right now. Because, again, who saw this coming? So clearly they see something here that others aren't. So that's the only reason I think that this interesting Affleck hypothetical is kind of fun to kind of go down that road. Garrett, like, what do you think? How do you feel about that?
I have two thoughts, right? First one is if we could ever get a limited series that made it clear that this is its, steal another Bill term, its own thing, and not connected to anything else, so we didn't have to relive all the other stuff. Is it connected, but just its own thing, with Affleck wanting to tell a Batman story, and that was going to be on a premium cable service or HBO Max. Sign me up. I couldn't get there fast enough. The second thing is, because Bill and Mario, because the two of you just talked about this, tomorrow or the day after this podcast is released, we've got this covered, is going to release a news story that says there's rumors that this is happening. So damn it, guys, why did you do this to us?
Oops.
Let me say one thing about, I think I know one person who's definitely wouldn't be for it. His name is Matt Reeves, so I'm not really worried about concerned that and Ben Affleck for that matter. I don't think he's a concern that wants to do it again either. So, but yes, at some point I'd love to see a Batman series done on HBO Max, and I would also, like as I said, as opposed to continuing this Snyderverse thing on HBO Max, I would rather see them do some different stuff with, like I said, with do Justice League Kingdom Come, do New Frontier, do Justice League Dark, or The Question, The Spectre. I mean, there's just so much with DC properties you could do. So before we're going to wrap up here shortly, and I want to talk just a little bit about the Batman. I got a little bit of news that may be positive. Just some final thoughts from everybody on this whole deal, and then we'll talk about something that is going to happen on the big screen, and that is the Batman. So Garrett, just sum up everything from the last week or so, or last 2 or 3 years for that matter, and then we're all going to move on, hopefully, from this.
Yeah, and that would be my sort of wrapping up thought. I hope we all move on from this. I'd like to see fandom in general play a little bit nicer than maybe we've seen leading up to and coming out of this. It's a tough time right now, and distractions are good. So having some news story to follow along with these characters that I love it's a good thing, and I hope it becomes a good thing. I hope it's enjoyable. I hope that my fears are put to rest when I see this, and I can appreciate it for what it is. And with that, I will say, I said before I wasn't quite cautiously optimistic. I'm moving in that direction because I want to move on with some positivity and hope we get something good back. Good.
Eric?
Yeah, my closing thoughts are just that everyone who wants this, who wanted the Zack Snyder Justice League cut, I hope that they all enjoy it. That's my biggest hope. They put in, regardless of how you feel, they put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and they're getting what they wanted. So I hope that at the end of the day, the people who really loved his vision, wanted to see it completed, my hope is that they loved it, no matter what the rest of us say. So. Well,
I agree. I'm with you, and I'll let Mario have the last word. But I agree with both Garrett and with Eric there. There were some good, and I acknowledge this, there are some good fans who were part of release the Snyder Cut process or movement, or whatever you want to call it, over the last 2 or 3 years. And I, as someone who started Batman on Film 22 years ago to lobby for good Batman films, I appreciate that success that they had with getting what they wanted, or getting influence and having a little influence on AT&T and Warner Brothers and so forth. But I hope fandom gets better, and maybe that's asking a lot. It's the toxicity surrounding that was the worst I have ever seen in my 22 years of doing this. When you're getting death threats and stuff like that over a movie, that's a movie. Think about that for a second. I tip my hat to Henry Cavill, who at least he did say something once it was announced and kind of asked fans to be nice. I do wish that Mr. Snyder at some point over these last few years had said, I appreciate the support, but some of your behavior is not acceptable and is not what this movement needs. And that never happened. That disappoints me. And I know why Warner Bros. Never said anything, because they, until last Wednesday, the Snyder Cut officially came out in November 17th of 2017. So I have not decided if I'm going to watch or not, but I do hope it's good. I hope it's not a piece of crap, because it is DC and Batman is part of it, and I don't want any more fuel or any more ammunition for people to be able to bash anything that's DC or Batman. So that's where I stand. Mario.
Yeah. Well, before I get, I want to just touch on the whole toxic fandom thing, because I've had a slightly different sort of trajectory with all that, because originally, there was a big bullseye on my head when I published that thing through the Splash Report about the upcoming, overhaul.
That was Splash Report.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that? Yeah, okay. Yeah. It was not Latino Review. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, but it's Latino Review 2.0, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I got you.
But, so I painted a big bullseye on my head. I had all the, as you call them, the zaddies come out after me telling me.
Hold on, let me correct you, sir. I only called them that because that's what they did call themselves.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So
all right, that was not a moniker of negativity. Yeah. That is something they called themselves.
Okay, all right.
Just want to be clear.
Well, I was at the center of a zaddy, hornet's nest for a while, and for me, things changed once the film came out, and I realized the full extent of what had just happened. In my mind, wow, all these people who fought so hard for this and believed so much in this just lost. They just had the rug pulled out from under them. And a lot of them were told this awful sob story that ends up being a lie from Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers now looks like the biggest villain ever, because they're the ones who brought in the whole angle, the whole situation about Autumn Snyder's suicide. They're the ones who gave us this false narrative about Joss Whedon's only coming in for a couple of weeks. So Warner Brothers pulled off this huge heist. They used a real personal tragedy to sell their own corporate maneuvering, and then they have the audacity to still slap his name on it for the on the credits when this movie comes out. So to me, I started almost understanding, wow, you guys are pissed and you're hurt, and you know what? I would feel the same way. So for me, once the movie came out, I slowly kind of started to shift a little bit to realize these people are angry. These people are hurt. They've been fed lies. They've had their emotions toyed with, bringing in personal tragedies and matters of life and death. They've had actors had to, lie to them about their status on the films. There was so much lying and shadiness and grossness in the way that Warner Brothers handled this, that I started going, you know what, when these people flip out at me and they accuse me of this, I'm not going to fight back. I'm either just going to mute or block them, because I'm just not going to get involved with that, because there was some shady awfulness that happened here, and there's going to be a backlash from it. And they can't get Jeff Johns on the phone, but they could yell at me. You know what I mean? So I started realizing, okay, I'm not going to fight fire with fire. I'm going to mute and block the ones that suck. And I swear, once I muted, maybe at a maximum, let's say 20 to 30 of the ones who were really instigating and coming after me and posting vlogs and making photo manips of my face on things, once I got rid of them, my experience with Zack Snyder fans has been like night and day for the last 2 years. I only really know the nice ones, so that's why I have a hard time relating. Well, I know you guys have gotten, a few of you have gotten basically so attacked and slandered, and it's gotten so heated and so nasty, but that's been so different from my experience because of the shift I had after Justice League came out. So I just wanted to just kind of note that on the toxic fandom element, that I don't really like. To me, there's no part of this that's the bad guys won, because I haven't really dealt with any bad guys since like February of 2018, so yeah. I just kind of wanted to note that, and to kind of put out that the way Warner Brothers sold this, the lies, the spin, the propaganda, and the fact that they brought in the death of Zack's daughter to try to cover up for what they did, to me, like, that opens up a lot of emotions, and it's going to make them seem like these big, evil, corporate tyrant overlords that need to be, have their feet held to the flames. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to just touch on the whole toxic fandom aspect of this, because I have a slightly different, experience and view on it. But now to kind of end positive, to me, after... Well,
let me say this real quick. Okay. Just to be fair, there were a lot of parties involved with the whole cover-up, the whole ruse.
Yeah.
And it was not just Warner Brothers Pictures and their publicity department. All I will say is that
that Snyder was complicit in the narrative.
The original director was not directing well before he left the project publicly, and that's all I want to say, and I just want to say it that way. So I think that I think there were multiple parties involved in this whole thing. Frankly, I think that after BVS, they should have just did a Superman Lives deal and just put Justice League in the turnaround and regrouped right there, and they would have never been in this mess in the first place. None of them. And so that's just me on a soapbox.
I know, so but of the aggrieved parties, who do you feel got the shortest end of the stick here? You know what I mean? Because Snyder had his entire vision and everything that they had already pre-approved. They had already given him the budgets. They had approved the scripts. They even delayed BVS to get the plan right. Remember, BVS was going to come out in 2015. So for years, he had all this time to put together this entire vision. And then before step 2 can even come out, they already cut off a half hour, re-edit it, and start shifting everything on a dime. And they use and at the same time he loses his daughter at the same time. You know what I mean? And now you know that this movie's going to come out in November, and it's going to say directed by Zack Snyder, but it's not going to have really anything to do with what you wanted to do. So when you look at the aggrieved parties, it's kind of easy to realize, well, who should I really sympathize for? The guy who was in a tough spot and just had to play ball and say what they asked him to say in order to make this go off without a hitch and not ruin his career? Or do you want to aim your anger at the studio and the people who created these narratives and who decided after 3 years of saying, here's all the money and all the time you need to make this, now on your very next step, we're going to kneecap you and you're not going to be able to release the movie that we said you could make, and everything else you wanted to do now has to change also. You know what I mean? So that's just how I view it. Maybe I'm too sympathetic, but to me, when I look at the aggrieved parties, my sympathies go with the artist, not with the corporation that just basically said, who gave him nothing but green lights until they gave him a brick wall and then showed him the door.
I just think there's a lot of moving parts here. I think a lot of people were at fault. Yes, I mean, Warner Brothers and all those folks are, for the most part, are gone now. That was part of that, which, is a good thing for going forward, regardless, But I think the whole thing's a mess.
Yeah,
and that's just
the whole thing is just ugly. And I'm just glad that we're going to.
The whole thing, the whole thing was a mess from the beginning. I mean, and it really started after Man of Steel, and that's where it started. Instead of making Man of Steel 2, we got BVS, and then they gave Snyder the keys to the kingdom, and it I understand.
I can
say, was Snyder's vision for everybody? No. well, then you shouldn't have gave it to him in the first place. It's not his
fault.
fault.
Because that's my thing. He didn't make these movies in a vacuum. He had to go in there and ask for $300 million and say, this is exactly what I'm doing. And these people said, sure, go for it. Then they see the movie and they go, oh, wait a minute, never mind. You know what I mean? Like that level of just like, come on, you asked for this. He gave you what he told you he was going to give you. And then you do all this.
That's correct.
You know, so that's why to me a lot of my anger goes towards the bosses, not the guy, you know.
Gotcha.
But this whole thing too about the whole thing being a mess kind of segues nicely into the positive note here that I want to end on, because this whole thing has been a mess. It's been a hideous few years to be a fan of DC on film because of how contentious and how controversial and all the whispers and all the rumors and all the animosity. It's been a tough few years. And that's why to me, what's cool now is that for the first time in ages, everyone has something to look forward to. You know, because up until now, there have been rival camps where those of the people who want to see the Snyder branch explored were looking forward to see his movies, but those of us who weren't really on board have been like, oh God, these movies are on the horizon and I guess I'm going to watch them because I love the characters, but I'm not into this vision. So it's kind of been like one group is for it, one group isn't. And now, and then after Justice League came out, there were people who were excited to see what was coming out, right? But now all the Snyder fans were no longer interested because of what had just happened. Now, for the first time in years, everyone has something to look forward to. Because now the Snyder fans get to have the HBO Max venture to look forward to and to feel like a right has been wrong and a wrong has been righted, justice has been served. And then for those of us who want to look forward to the Batman and whatever else is coming, we get to still look forward to those too. So for the first time in years, I feel like we're not rival camps. We're just DC fans looking forward to stuff on different types of screens. And I think that's pretty damn exciting.
Very good. Eric, you want to, before we move on to the Batman, you want to just comment on anything that we just said in regards to fandom and this whole mess that started 7 years ago, basically?
No, I mean, I think we've all discussed this and rehashed this many times, so I don't need to go in any further. You guys did a good job.
Fantastic. All right, so let's move on and talk about a little bit about the Batman. The Batman has been shut down since March because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that thing was rolling along pretty well. Already we got to see the first reveal of Robert Pattinson and what was labeled Matt Reeves camera test, and we've seen the Batmobile, 3 pictures of it, and of course a bunch of spy pictures. We've seen the suit and so forth and whatnot, but a lot of buzz around it, and then it came to a screeching halt. But it looks like there's some whispers. I know the UK film and TV industry has gotten okay to start back up, and there's going to have to be some protocols put in place for safety and health reasons, but it looks like maybe that July-ish, the Batman could be back in front of the cameras. So, Eric, you ready to pick up where you left off with the Batman back in March as far as following the film?
Oh, of course. I had mixed feelings on things I had seen so far, things that had been released. But when that happens, it always just ups the intrigue, right? So I'm just now, you're more intrigued now as where's he going with this? What's he doing? So I'm happy to hear that. Again, I'm happy to move forward. I want to move forward. I love Matt Reeves as a director, so I've always been interested in what he was going to do. So to hear that it's going to be shooting again means that it's closer to the end date.
Mario, just real quick, what's your anticipation, excitement level for the Batman, and what did you think about what we saw before they shut down back in March?
See, I'm very excited about the Batman. I'm very excited about the creativity that Matt Reeves is bringing to the project. His casting has been very interesting. Lots of the little rumors about the plot and the number of villains and all that other stuff. And for years now, everything that's been said about this movie is right in my sweet spot. Like, it all sounds like this is going to be a fairly phenomenal Batman movie. So I'm very hyped for it. The suit, I initially I was a little bit like, I wish it wasn't quite so armored, but overall I want to see it in action, and I'm keeping an open mind. For me, when I think about the Batman, I still think about how odd it's going to be, and you're going to hate me for bringing this up, but how odd it's going to be that of all the Justice League characters, he's the only one getting rebooted, and I wonder if that's going to be confusing for mainstream audiences, right? Because we're going to see Gal Gadot live on, we're going to see Jason Momoa live on, we're apparently going to see Ezra Miller live on, and there seems to be renewed energy around a Man of Steel 2. So here we go with like basically most of the pillars of the JL will continue on, but Batman is getting rebooted inside of a vacuum. So that's what I'm just curious about, how that element, is there going to be like a, well, this is weird because this is not the Batman that coexists with all those other heroes that are getting movies around these Batman movies. So for me, I know it's like a geeky thing to be worried about, but that's the thing I'm most intrigued by, to see like, is it going to be weird that he's the only mainline Justice Leaguer who is basically starting from scratch and exists on his own island while the other ones all live on?
He's Warner Brothers' number one IP.
Yeah.
First of all. So, and secondly, I think that as long as the film is good, people will watch it. I don't think they're really concerned about. Yeah. General audience is not concerned about how things fit, how continuity goes, and this and that. They go watch a movie. It's good. They like it. They'll tell people to like it, and they'll do well. That's where I'm at. That's where I've always been with that kind of stuff. So, I got you. All right, let's get the hell out of here. And Eric, get anything you want to plug before we get out?
Of course I do.
All right.
So, myself and Peter Vera, we have started our new podcast called Straight Outta Gotham. You can hear it on Spotify. You can hear it on iTunes. You can interact with us on Twitter at straight_O_G. Same thing on Instagram. We have about 4 episodes in now, and it's been a really fun experience for us. We've had some people on who you might know, so I hope you all check it out and tell us what you think.
Very good. Where can they find you on Twitter?
Oh, you can find me directly at Finally33. It's spelled Finale33. And yeah, any problems with any of the editing on that podcast or the Batman Book Club, you can yell at me for.
Mario.
Yeah, you can find me on the Twitter at IDJWeddings, spelt exactly like that. There's no underscores. It's just IDJWeddings. Very easy. And my only geek outlet these days is the Fanboy Podcast. So check out the Fanboy Podcast. I just broke a long hiatus because I had to talk about this Snyder Cut stuff last week. So the Fanboy Podcast is back. That is the one outlet I'm giving myself to explore all this geeky stuff. So check that out. And you can find me again on Twitter at IDJWeddings.
Very good. You can find me on Twitter at BatmanOnFilm. And just want to plug, I was on the most recent episode of the Batman Book Club, which is hosted by Ryan Lauer, and we talk about Batman Year 100. So check that out. There's a link from Batman on Film proper, and you can find the Batman Book Club wherever you find your great podcast, like this one right here. So and Garret had to bunk out because he is, of course, he's working from home, so he had a work meeting he had to get to. But you can find all Garrett's stuff on Batman on Film as well, including where you can find him on Twitter. And so for Mario and Garret and Eric, I am Bill, and we will catch you next time.
You have been listening to the official podcast of the one and only Batman on Film website. On Twitter, follow BOF at Batman on Film and the Batman Podcast Network at BatPod Network. For Jett and everyone at Batman on Film, I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening to the authoritative, definitive, the original Batman on Film.